Hi, I'm Steve Berg, CEO of AISH. Welcome to the Good with Money podcast, where we invite exceptionally successful people to share their ideas about two things that we at AISH are most passionate about. How can human beings reach their highest potential, and how can we work together to make the world a better, happier, more peaceful place? Just before we get started, please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel and feel free to like and comment below. Today, it is my absolute pleasure, and you'll see in a moment why. I'm really, really excited to introduce Bari Erber. Bari, welcome.
Hi guys, how are you?
We are great. I have been waiting for a while to have this conversation. I think it's an exceptionally important conversation for so many reasons. First of all, I'm fascinated to hear about your business. We've had a lot of financial folks on here, and I think what you do across the country has been amazing. But also combined with your background in terms of your Jewish education, I think it's going to be a phenomenal conversation. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you, Bari.
I'm looking forward.
Excellent. So for the folks that don't know, I mean, you and I know each other a very, very long time, right? Can you talk a little bit about your background, your schooling, kind of like what got you to the present?
So I grew up in Manhattan. I am an MDS graduate. Then I went to Frisch. Then when I was making the decision between going to college and going to Israel for the year, I decided to go to Israel for the year. I ended up in Israel for 2.5 years. I went to Midrashet Moriah, then to Shalhevet, then to Malot. And at some point, my father's like, you have to come home. So I said, okay, I'm going to come home, but I know I want to go into teaching. So I'm not really going to go with the traditional college approach. I'm going to go with this plan called Thomas Edison State University, where I will get credits for 2.5 years of Israel. And I'm going to finish my college degree in Borough Park. It wasn't really what he was expecting, but he's like, okay, as long as you go for your master's, I'm okay with it. So I came back, I finished in Shalhevet in Borough Park, and then went to Azrieli for my master's. And then for my specialist license, along the way, I got married, started having babies, and I was like, I don't know if I could defend my thesis, even though I graduated and had my thesis done. And I started teaching. At first, it was very important for me to not teach in the typical modern Orthodox day schools. So I taught early childhood at the JCC of Manhattan for children that wouldn't have been exposed to a typical Orthodox woman as their teacher / really their whole Judaic exposure, because after early childhood, they were really going on to non-Jewish schools. So I did that for many years. I also taught Hebrew school and did the curriculum development at BJ, which is they're a very unique type of shul in Manhattan where people are definitely affiliated. It's not conservative, it's not reform, it's not Orthodox. It's a little bit of everything under one house. So I did their curriculum development for their Hebrew school program. And then I started doing the curriculum development at the GACC. And then at some point when my 3-year-old was 3, she needed barrettes. And I was like, barrettes? I can make barrettes. I'm an early childhood teacher. I know how to glue some stuff together. And I started making barrettes. And my mother-in-law said to me, this is what you're using your degree for? And I'm like, if I could make $2,000 extra a month to buy myself whatever I want, why not? And on August 14th, 2007, we walked into our first store and they took the barrettes. And my mother-in-law said, if you make $10,000 in the first year, I'll walk to the bank naked. I said, you're on, because who doesn't need a good dare, right?
Yeah.
We hit that goal by September. And to this day, it's now 14 years later, she hasn't walked. And I remind her that when she's old and doesn't have the ability to fight me, I am pushing her to that bank naked. We now have a full force accessory company. We sell to over 6,000 stores worldwide.
Wow.
We have offices in Atlanta, Dallas, LA, New York, Korea, and China. Mm-hmm. I used to do way more traveling than I do now, but now I have 6 kids, so it gets a little hard. All of my kids have pretty much been everywhere that I go, they go. They're sort of like my Amex. We don't leave home without them, so they're very cultural.
Right.
We are very friendly with all the Chabads all over China, because thank God for them, because otherwise there would be no food. And And that's sort of where we are in a nutshell. And once I got to the position where I was in a position that I didn't need everything that I was making, I sort of started thinking about how can I now give back to various organizations. So over the years, we've teamed up with Amuna Homes, with Yad Sarah, Yad Leah, High Lifeline, and we come up with ideas of ways to enrich their core values while using either Bari Lynn products or resources that I have. So like for High Lifeline, every year we send them backpacks for all the children in High Lifeline, so that if they're sick, if they're not happy, this could bring a smile to them, and it's a new product that they're seeing on the stores at Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus, but it brings a smile to them, and they get to pick patches. We've done trucker hat events at Camp Simcha. Yad Leah, I think, comes to my office 3 to 4 times a year and brings back a ton of stuff to Israel. Amuna, we do a lot of work with all their homes in Israel. It's really me. I think of myself as a vessel where I have to do what I have to do to support my children, and then whatever's extra, whatever I could do to help the greater cause is my ultimate goal.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot there to unpack. That was unbelievable.
You thought this would take 30 minutes. I'm like 5 minutes in.
I know, right? I forgot what we were dealing with here, but perhaps I can ask some questions along the way,
sure.
which is, it seemed like you got your whole beginning in Jewish education, that you went to Israel for 2.5 years, became incredibly inspired. You talked about going from the West Side to Borough Park, your degrees, et cetera. I think you get am I right about this, a doctorate along the way in Jewish education?
Yes.
Right. So maybe what was it that spoke to you, number one, about Israel, number two, about Jewish education? It seemed like you came back on, and it also was really interesting when you talked about this. It was almost like a side comment. It was, I didn't want to go to the normal place to teach that you would find normal Orthodox from women. I wanted to go to a place where they wouldn't have exposure to someone like me, so I could, kind of show them who we are and what we are, et cetera. That was an amazing piece. So tell us a little bit about what set you on that journey before, and then we'll get to the business end, but just in terms of the spirituality, what you found in Israel, what you found in Jewish education, and why you wanted to make that difference originally.
So I think a big part of me is, I think it's Lador Vador, right? So I'm very into intergenerational. So I didn't know all my grandparents, but I did know some of my grandparents. And my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor who was from a wealthy family my paternal grandmother, from a wealthy family in Hungary. And she lost it all in the war. And she came here with nothing. And when she came here, she literally figured out a way to rebuild herself. And the way she started rebuilding herself was collecting rents in Manhattan. And one day she's like, why am I doing this? I could own real estate myself. And this was the visionary of who she was. And she walked into a bank and she said, can you lend me $30,000? And they said, sure, but how do we know we're getting paid back? And she said, write down these numbers. You'll get every penny back. And her numbers were A7547 and from the Holocaust. And she started buying properties that had what to do with her arm. So
wow.
Where you see this background behind me, this is her apartment on 75th Street, which she then left to me. But and then my grandfather was a Moroccan Jew who fought in the French resistance during World War II. And then they picked him to go to the Haganah, a Moroccan Jew that learned full-on Yiddish in Israel, and then came to America. And him and my grandmother had my father. And then on my other side, I really never knew my grandparents, but all I had ever heard about was that my grandfather was a mechanech and was very into Orthodox Judaism, and my grandmother was a balas chesed. All she cared about was bringing families together and being charitable and extending herself however she was. So this is what was instilled in me. It was instilled in me. You went to shul and you became the president of the shul. You went to a community and you built their schools. And at the forefront of who you are is your shul, schools, and mikvah. That was who you were. And whatever you could do for those organizations, that was what was going to define you. It wasn't about what type of clothes you were going to wear and who you were going to hang out with and what social class you were in. Because even if you didn't have money, however you could support those institutions is how you were going to support those institutions. And that's really what molded me into who I am. And since a early age, I mean, I think I'm the longest standing vice president in our shul. And every year I sort of joke around with the rabbi, like, when am I off the hook? He's like, I don't even know what hook you're talking about, because if you leave, I'm out. So that's sort of my molding and how I started. And I try to be relatable. I don't try to be this woman. Listen, I cover my hair. I cover all the pieces. I'm an all or nothing type of girl. And whether it's my store owners in Dubai, they all know where I stand. I don't hide who I am, but at the same time, I'm relatable, and I live in a modern world. And I mean, I hate to say this, we have TVs in our house, and I go to the movies, and I go out with other couples, but I'm very grounded in who I am and my values on what I'm going to instill in my children and where I stand as a person.
What's amazing about your journey is most of the folks that I speak to, basically, you know, they got their MBAs, they got their law degrees, and they went to business and the whole thing. And then at some point when they did quite well, they circled back to their values, et cetera. It sounds like, you know, you started life, you know, with your values in terms of making the Kiddush Hashem, in terms of going out there, in terms of service, and pulling from your grandparents in terms of putting that into who you are. And then you almost tripped into the business. And then once it went, of course, because you're a driven, successful person, went really big, you circle back to your values to make sure that whatever you did was going to be grounded into your Jewish values.
That's what I try. Listen, this year was even a challenging year for us. We close all Yom Tovim. We're not open. My company is shut. And early on, when we hire our employees, I say to them, and they're hourly, these are the days we're shut. I'm sorry if it makes this month even more crazy for you, but we're shut. But at the end of the day, we're going to have deadlines, and they appreciate it. They learn that, like, just like I believe in my values, they're never going to get hurt in my company. They can always come to me if something's going on. And there have been times where I've been put in a situation where a business deal has to get done on second day of Rosh Hashanah, and we're not doing it. And at times it's hurt me as a company, and at times it benefited me, because the CEO will call and be like, why weren't you on this call? And I'll say, listen, this is what we believe. I wasn't going to change it for your call. And then they extend the deadline, or they extend the meeting so that we could have it otherwise. So I think that people have come to understand I'm very honest. I'm very straightforward. And I'm really only doing this as long as my values can stay aligned from what I'm doing.
Have you had the opposite experience? Have you found that some folks out there actually gave you a hard time because of your values Jewish?
Yes.
Jewish?
Yes. I've had companies that have tried to play games or try to manipulate the system, and I won't do it. I mean, to me, my core is my core. And if I'm going to break that core, it's not going to be, listen, there's more important things to me than business. My values are what I am and who I stand for. At the end of the day, when I should live to 120, when I go up there, he's not going to say, did you do well in business? He's going to ask me about my core. And a lot of times I've seen it affect people in ways that I didn't even think it would affect people. Like, I have stores that have never even known what Rosh Hashanah is that now text me Happy New Year, because they're now aware that Bari's going to shut down and they need what I need. So what I have. So they're going to start earlier. They're going to push themselves so that they could be understanding. And that's really all it is. I would never call a non-Jewish company on Christmas.
Right.
I would never say to them on Easter, I have a deadline. You need to
Mutual
talk to them on Easter. So that understanding is really what forges our relationship. And luckily, I mean, I have a relationship with every single one of my store owners. Know they can call me and text me whenever they want. They will not hear back from me from Friday night to Saturday night, and they will not hear back from me on any holidays. And they even write that. They're like, I know it's your holiday, but this has come to my mind. Can you just respond afterwards? So it's working, I think.
You've trained them all. What do you think? Look, you started, like you said, you went in like, maybe I can sell a couple clips here. Next thing you know, you're global, you're international, you're in all these places. All in the beginning, you probably never thought you'd be zipping off around China to do this. What do you think it was that helped you build this? You've seen other business folks, and a lot of people are not as successful as you. What do you think the trait was that kept you moving and growing and building?
I definitely believe in the concept of mazel. I definitely believe in this concept of the right place at the right time. But also, me and my husband are in this now. So I do high end and he does low end. So it was sort of like a sink or swim. Like either we're both going to be successful or we're going to have to start all over again. So when you have that determination and that constant, like, we're going to get this going and we want to build our family and we want to have something to give over for our family, you jump through all the hoops you need to jump through in order to get there. There was no giving up because I'll never forget. And this is like every time I say it, it's like, it reminds me of my childhood. I was a big basketball player growing up. And one of the games in 8th grade, we lost. And I came home and I was so upset to my grandmother. And I said something to her and she goes, in my camp, we had no basketball. Oh. And I was like, oh, okay. But sort of when you remind yourself of how fortunate you are to be able to jump through the hoops, it realigns what your hoops are, right? So like, thank God this isn't life or death. And I always say this to my customers. We could fix this. This isn't brain surgery. Like if I have to tweak something, if I have to figure out a different resource, I try to jump through the hoops, but with that mindset so that my stress level doesn't get here. It sort of stays like here. If it has to do with business, because at the end of the day, we'll work through it. We'll get through it. We'll figure something out. And then if we can't, I understand. And I personally never tell my stores not to go to other people. I always say to them, if you could find something better there, go, because I think they appreciate them. I don't want them to I don't want them to think I'm an all or nothing. I'm not an all or nothing. And at the end of the day, there have been times where I've had stores that for whatever reasons we can't work together. And I'm like, okay, I understand. Let's just make sure we're like, we don't owe each other anything. We move on. And it's always funny. Like within a year, they're back to me.
I'll be back.
And my reps always are like, how do you get them back? Like most people, like they don't come back. And I'm like, let them find another vendor that's going to give them this customer support, that they're going to speak to a CEO whenever they want, that they're really going to be heard. Because I really do try to hear everything. They're not going to find it. So they end up coming back to me. And then we start all over and we start fresh. And it's like Rosh Hashanah all over again. And we go through like we did tshuva, we moved on, and great. Now let's jump over.
As a driven businesswoman, do people ever do a double take? Do you have 6 kids at home?
All the time.
All the time.
I have customers that literally ask me like, you're joking, right? I'm like, what's the joke? Like,
all right, here's the picture.
We're like, here they are. Not only do I have 6 kids, we're in alphabetical order. We're A, B, C, D, F, G, H. Like people think it's hysterical. And like my 4th is named Simon Finn for we were finished. He was my Dayenu. And then Gigi was God's gift and grandma's gift. And then Gigi needed a sibling, you know. So at a certain point, it's like the more the merrier. And like my kids, you know, people always ask me, how do I be a with it mom? I think part of it really is the fact that we live in New York City. It allows me to walk. My office is 8 minutes away. I am a nursing mom. I come home every 4 hours to nurse my baby. It's my priorities. It's what are my priorities? Right. Where am I going to let my priorities down? And for me, my number one mission in life is to be a mom and to instill in my children hard work and core values. And I think they really do see that with who I am and where I'm driven. And the funny thing is like my daughter just went to join iShine, which is a program in New Jersey where they help children that aren't as fortunate or have siblings that are sick or they're going through their own things. And she signed up. And when she signed up, someone said to her, Erber, as in Bari Erber's daughter. And she's like, she wanted to say no because she knew once they asked that question, that just meant she was in. So like sometimes she wants to like do things on her own also. Right. But
Right.
like, she's like, Mommy, is there any organization that you have nothing to do with? I was
So,
like,
so
yeah.
that's a perfect pivot. That's a perfect pivot because let's say we don't have a ton of, I could talk about your business and your career and all this stuff all day long and your values, but let's talk about philanthropy for a moment because, you know, there are one thing that we've had so many conversations with so many folks is there's so many good causes out there. It's almost overwhelming. How do you figure out exactly what you feel you should support or what you should give your, you know, X amount of time that you have aside from all the roles that you play as mom, as businesswoman, et cetera? How do you identify, you know, those causes that are worth your attention?
So to me, there's two types of philanthropy. There's a philanthropy that needs my time. There's the philanthropy that needs my resources. There's the philanthropy that I want people to know down the line that we were involved with them. So that's how I sort of separated in my mind. So first and foremost, I love helping organizations that have children involved because that's my mama bear in me. If there is a child that needs help, I'm going to help. So when it wasn't that they needed my resources, I started when I first started having children. There's an organization called Zichro Menachem where they give, you cut your hair and you donate it to sick children. Every time I have a child, I grow my hair out and I give it to a sick child. I've done it 6 times. My kids have done it 3 times. So that was like resources that I was able to give even before there was the money component. Then there's Chai Lifeline, Amuna, Yad Leah. Those are the places that need both resources and me. So I give a lot of that. And then there are things, me and my husband took on an oath when we were in a certain position. We spoke to a rabbi and they explained to us the importance of writing Torahs and that the world needs Torahs because that's how you're really alive in this whole Judaism. So we took on a neder that we were going to make a Sefer Torah every single year. And that's really, one is going to Aisha Torah because it is somewhere that does, places that do incredible work with giving over the word of Torah, to me, is an organization that I want to work with. And any way that we could work with them, that's how I'm going to do it. So if we could spread the words of Torah, to me, that's like the ultimate goal in my life. So we're, I think, now onto our 5th Torah. We're still waiting to give ours to Aish. And also protecting the state of Israel. We're very involved in Hatzalah because if we have no homeland, then like that's one of my cores. So that's basically how I judge things. It's
does that come from your grandmother, just in terms of coming from Holocaust survivors, understanding?
Yes. It's sad and scary, but I'm 41 years old and I still have a safe in my house that with to go, like my passports are ready. The things I need are ready. Kiddush cup is in there, candlesticks. Like I still have that mentality because please God, we should all be together and we should all be healthy and safe, but our homeland is Israel.
Right. Amen. I couldn't agree more. This is amazing. And especially for me, the most moving thing in this whole conversation was listening to how the values that you got in Israel and through your training as an educator, you know, and, you know, it's almost like your side was building this whole business, but really you kept your values intact the whole way through and were able to circle back to them. It's really amazing. Like I said, so many people, and I have the most incredible people, but they become very, very set on their business. At some point they circle back, but it's much later in life. It seems like literally it was part and parcel. And frankly, it's probably a large part of the reason you were so successful. You know, Kadosh Baruch Hu, God the Almighty, really gives, as you said many, many times, really helps people, you know, that have the right intention.
It's all about intention and mindset, I think.
Agreed. Bari, thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule, from both your family, your business, and everything going on. You know, just the example that you set, that you and your husband set. You know, we've now known each other a long time. We're actually now at the end, I can say we're cousins. That you know, that is something. You know, so on a very personal level, I can't tell you just how proud I am of you and everything you've accomplished.
Thank you. And we're proud of you.
Thank
I said,
you. Okay.
my son, every time he's in school and someone says the word Aish, he goes, "That's my cousin."
Absolutely. No, thank you. It's really, this has been amazing and terrific. Thank you so much, Bari.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for joining Good with Money. We hope you enjoyed this chat and you agree that the very best thing about success is the opportunity it provides to lift the world up along with all of you. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.